So I just watched the Backrooms movie, and I really want to talk about it. And I want to start off by saying that I really don't think the Backrooms, as a concept, not just the film, is about monsters or getting lost or about yellow wallpaper, flickering fluorescent lights, or the fact that every room somehow looks like the world's saddest insurance office. Like, yeah, those things are really scary, but I think that a lot of us are fucking missing the point of the Backrooms. What makes the Backrooms stick with people really isn't the monster design or the levels or the jump scares or the endless maze itself. It's the feeling, that strange, impossible to describe feeling that really settles into your chest while you're watching the film or watching the short films that have come before the movie. The feeling that you've been there before is not a literal feeling. It's an emotional feeling. The feeling of wandering through old memories, looking backwards instead of forward, being trapped inside your own mind, that's the feeling that I get from watching the movie. And I think a lot of us also feel that way. The older I get, the more I think The Backrooms is one of the most emotionally honest horror stories ever created. It's not realistic. It's not. But it visualizes something that most people experience but struggle to explain, because there really is no way to show or explain what goes on inside our heads. And I think the Backrooms really can help us do that. What does grief look like? What does regret look like? Nostalgia, burnout, what does it look like? What does it look like when you spend years replaying the past inside your own head? And I think the Backrooms gives us an answer. It's an endless maze, hallways that never end, doors that lead nowhere, doors that make sense, rooms filled with things you recognize but no longer understand because they're out of the context in which you initially experienced them in. They look like memories that have been left out in the rain for way too long, and they're washed out and fucked up. And that's why I think this movie is so powerful, because beneath all the horror and the amazing sound design and amazing cinematography, and holy shit, that soundtrack was awesome, the Backrooms isn't really about the Backrooms. It's about what happens when we get lost inside ourselves. So I would really like to analyze the Backrooms movie. This is your warning right now that this is a spoiler analysis. It is not a review. I'm not really telling you what I think about the movie. I thought it was amazing, by the way, but I'm not getting into that. I'm getting into the symbolism. So, spoilers. Please watch the movie. It was fucking incredible. But there's your warning. One of the most beautiful pieces of symbolism that this movie does is making the Backrooms themselves represent something. The horror of looking backwards. One of the most painful parts of being human is that we can revisit the past, but we can never return to it. We remember our childhood, friends, relationships, people we've lost, but we actually can't go back. No matter how badly we want to go back and fix shit, or see our grandma one last time before she passes away, we can't. And I think that's what the Backrooms understands better than almost any story I've ever seen. Story in general, not just horror story. I even think that the Backrooms covers this topic better than The Great Gatsby. And a lot of folks will say that The Great Gatsby has covered the complications of revisiting the past in your own mind very well. But I really think the Backrooms does it better, or at least the Backrooms does it in a more modern way that I think a wider audience can relate to. The characters in this movie, especially Clark and Mary, spend the entire movie searching for answers and for closure and for understanding. They're searching for something that will finally make all their pain make sense. And isn't that what we all do? How many nights have you spent replaying an old conversation and coming up with a comeback in your head where you're like, fuck, I wish I would have said that shit? Or in the shower, you're arguing with your goddamn shampoo bottles. How many times have you imagined what you should have done? Maybe you should have, I don't know, gone over to your friend's house more often, or maybe you should have called your mom a little bit more. How many times have you wondered if your life would be different if you just had made one different choice? Even in the movie when Clark is doing his whole acting exercise at the beginning of the film with his therapist Mary, that theme is sprinkled in there of the stuff he wished he could have done differently. I think about this all the time. Did I take the wrong job? Did I let somebody go out of my life that I shouldn't have? Did somebody leave me behind? Would maybe you miss who you used to be? I think a lot of us do. Maybe you miss who someone else used to be. Maybe a friendship has just evolved and changed. The human brain is obsessed with unfinished stories because it wants closure and explanations. It wants neat little endings. And I think that's why the Backrooms ending perfectly nails this on the head, because it didn't have a neat ending that made perfect, beautiful sense. Because that's not life. Life doesn't have endings that make perfect sense. There's clarity in them, but they're never perfect. Life never gives us those things. It gives us wonder, and we always are going to wonder. And we're always going to wander, too, through memory. We wander through regret and grief, and these endless hallways of the Backrooms are a visual representation of us searching for a door that has closure, but it just doesn't exist, or it's locked. Just like in the Backrooms when they're trying to escape from a monster and the door is locked. That's what it is. The Backrooms is what that process looks like of searching for meaning in something that really doesn't have meaning anymore. I want to talk about Mary's character for a second and her childhood home that we visit and we see a little bit. Her childhood home is when nostalgia begins to rot. Mary's story absolutely broke my heart with her, like, crazy-ass fucking mother. Like, it's nuts. But because at first her childhood home feels a little bit comforting. Like, it feels safe and warm because it had, like, you know, the furniture, the old couch, the old carpets that we all kind of grew up with. And she keeps returning to it in her mind. Because that place seems to really matter to her. That's where all of her trauma was. That's where her crazy-ass fucking bat mother was. And honestly, who among us doesn't have a place like that? It could be your grandparents' house, or it could be your own home, or your best friend's house, or wherever it may be. Regardless, back to my point, we all have places that become sacred in our memories, that are frozen in time, and I think her entire part in this movie shows that. We quietly preserve them, but that's what's terrifying about this. That's what happens in the Backrooms when her childhood home, starts to melt into the floor and the walls of the Backrooms. It becomes distorted when details disappear. The warmth is gone, the life is gone, and it is just a hollow outline of what it used to be in the Backrooms. And suddenly we're left with something that resembles a memory but doesn't feel like that anymore. Because memories aren't permanent, unfortunately. I know people think that, but the tragedy is they're not permanent because the past is preserved somewhere else. But it really fucking isn't. Every time we remember something, we rewrite it. Every single time, memory changes, details fade, emotions become exaggerated, reality becomes distorted, and that scene where her home is melting away in front of her is exactly that. Eventually, what remains isn't even the event itself, it's our relationship with that event. And that's what Mary's house became. It's not a house, it's grief wearing the shape of her family's home. The nostalgia after it has begun to decay. It's no longer nostalgic, it's tragic, it's traumatic. It's the realization that no matter how much you engage with that past, you can never fix it or return to it. And that's why this movie is so profound and beautiful, because it shows this heartbreaking side of humanity. Yes, her house fucking sucked. She was trapped in there. But she can't change that now. It's too late. And I think a lot of us need to come to terms with that. We can't change our childhood anymore. We gotta move the fuck on. And that's why it's so prominent in the Backrooms, because she didn't really move on. You could see it throughout her journey in the film. She knows. She even says she couldn't save Clark. She couldn't save anybody because she couldn't come to terms with, she couldn't fix what had already happened to her. Because all of us had places we'd love to visit one more time. But we're not trying to visit the actual place. The actual place is meaningless. We want to exist the version in our memories. And sometimes those versions become distorted just like the Backrooms because they're gone. And honestly, after watching the Backrooms, it makes me think that once you leave somewhere or once you experience something, it will always be gone after that. And that is really, really what the Backrooms was trying to show us. Now I want to talk a little bit about Clark's story and what he represents in this, and I think his is the pain of refusing to let go. Mary's story is about nostalgia and trying to change the past, but Clark's story is about grief. And honestly, I think it's one of the saddest things I've seen in horror, because Clark isn't really searching to fix his marriage or searching for his wife or trying to get back together with her or anything like that. He's searching for the feelings that she gave him when they were happy. And those are not the same thing. We often tell ourselves that we're holding on to people, but sometimes we're holding on to a version of them that only exists in our mind. Like this fantasy world. Like the woman that Clark encounters in the back room with the red hair that he's talking to and he seems happy with, but she's all fucked up and shit. I do believe that is the memory and projection of his wife. And the fact that she's distorted shows that he no longer remembers his wife anymore. He remembers an echo of her, a collection of memories stitched together that are held by emotions. He feels a certain type of way. He feels a lot of resentment towards his wife, but there's still that care behind it. But he no longer remembers that woman at all. Her face was distorted. He couldn't even clearly picture her face anymore. And it's just depressing how he still tries to resolve the conflict that night that she left him. And that's how grief works. At first, you remember everything. Their voices, the laugh, the way they walked, everything they said. But then years pass, and the details begin to disappear, like her face. And it's not because you love them less. It's because you're a fucking human being who can't remember everything in the world, and memories fade. And that can be fucking terrifying. And I think that movie properly portrayed that as well. And one of the cruelest things about grief is realizing that you will never fully remember every little detail, no matter how hard you hold on to it. And I don't think it was just an allegory for losing your wife to divorce. I think it was an allegory of losing anybody to anything. Illness, losing touch, any of that. Everything slips away eventually, and the Backrooms transforms that fear into a literal place and a literal monster that we can see. And I think it's very important that the projection of his wife ran away when the big old pirate monster man came in, because that was his ego, and she was so fucking scared of it. But Clark embraced it because he did not want to change. And I also have a theory that that Clark that we saw when he kidnapped Mary and everything like that wasn't the real Clark. I think he was dead after that, and that was just a projection of him as well. But I'm not going to get into my theories on the movie in this video. This is strictly an analysis. But the Backrooms is a place where memories remain, but people don't. And I think it's a beautiful representation. It's a place where emotions survive long after reality had vanished. I already mentioned it, but I want to talk about the pirate monster dude. And it's when your own ego becomes the monster. And I think that this movie did a perfect job at explaining that. It's one of my favorite symbols in the movie, because at first glance, it just a little bit honestly seemed kind of ridiculous. Like a giant pirate dude. Like, are you fucking kidding me? But we're discussing trauma and grief and existential dread, and suddenly fucking Captain Crunch is here. I fucking thought it was cool though, but you know. But I don't think it's random at all, because the pirate represents Clark's public identity. He had the pirate on his store. It was a version of himself he sold to the world in his little commercials and shit. It was a performance. It was an image. And that right there was his ego, because it wasn't him. And that's what makes this symbol so brilliant, because ego is often what keeps us trapped. His pirate man was keeping him trapped in the backrooms. Like when he was trying to escape the backrooms, we saw like a monster pick up the camera. It was real tall and everything like that, because it was the pirate man. So he couldn't escape because his own ego was preventing him from doing it. We become attached to our own identities, and that's the identity he wanted to attach to. It was the somewhat successful, and I know his furniture brand was dying and everything, but he felt like that was his successful part of him. He thought it was like the creative one or anything like that. It was the hero. It wasn't the failure. But eventually those identities become prisons. We spend so much time protecting who we were that we stop becoming who we could be. Clark is haunted by a version of himself. He's haunted by the version of himself that will not fucking move on from his goddamn divorce. And the version can't be changed because he won't do it. A version of him that refuses to move forward. And in the end, it's what kills him. And I think that's a beautiful display. I know a lot of the times this idea of ego and hubris is explored in a lot of tragedies, and I do consider the Backroom movie a tragedy. I do consider Clark a tragic hero. By definition, he technically is a hero who falls victim to his own ego and does end up dying. He is a tragic hero. I hate to get all Shakespeare on ya, but if this was a Shakespeare play, it would be called The Tragedy of Clark and His Fucking Furniture Store. But I don't think that Clark was killed by the monster because the monster was necessarily stronger than him, because he had survived the monster for God knows how long before Mary came. But I think he didn't beat the monster because he never learned how to let go of that ego, and it eventually literally consumed him. And I want to talk about the backrooms themselves as a symbol, because I think they symbolize the human mind very well. The more I think about it, the more I believe it's consciousness, and it's not a healthy one. Put that out there right there. It's a trapped, wounded, fucked up loop, and unfortunately that is how thoughts work. One memory leads to another, fear starts leading to another, then you start regretting shit, then you're thinking about a mistake you made 5 years ago that literally doesn't matter, and then somehow you're crying over something that hasn't happened, that happened when you were fucking 12 years old, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't get to sleep, and you're wondering why your life even matters, and then you're googling whether penguins have knees at 3 o'clock in the morning because you just need to distract yourself a little bit. But the human brain is fucking unstructured chaos, and they kept returning to this phrase. It's like describing a dog to someone who has never seen a dog before, and they try to draw it. It's gonna be fucked up, and I think that's what the backrooms represent, is trying to explain a thought process, your thought process, to someone who doesn't understand your brain, because unfortunately you don't understand anybody else's brain. You don't even fucking understand your brain half the time. I mean, I'm telling you the truth right there. I'm the same way, man, so it's all good. But your brain is insane. It constantly creates connections and searches for meaning. It's trying to build a map, but the problem is not everything means something. It doesn't. I get told this all the time. Not every single thought you have is your own thought. Not every memory contains a life lesson. Not every tragedy contains a purpose, and not every question has an answer. And that's what the backroom shows, because our minds will always keep searching anyway and stretch into endless hallways with impossible architecture, room after room, and that impossible architecture represents those meanings that we cannot physically reach or understand, because that's why the backrooms feel familiar. We've all lived there. Every single one of us lives in the backroom, some of us more than others, but we've all been lost in those endless corridors inside our mind, trying to escape and trying to find meaning in something we just simply were never meant to find meaning in. And then I want to shift a little bit from the backrooms and talk a little bit about where the backrooms came from and all of that shit in liminal space. I want to talk about why liminal space terrifies us. I did cover this in an older video where I was still trying to figure shit out, so if you want to watch that, it's there. But I'm going to talk about it again here, because that movie had so many liminal spaces in it, just sprinkled out. Like, his furniture store was a liminal space, that little neighborhood where his employees were living seemed like a liminal space. They were sprinkled everywhere. And I think most people misunderstand liminal spaces, because people just say liminal spaces are scary because they're empty, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I think liminal spaces are scary because they're abandoned promises. An empty mall isn't scary because there's nobody in it. It's scary because it was supposed to be filled with people and promise, and it was supposed to have business, but it failed. Everybody's gone. A playground at night isn't scary because it's empty. No shit, it's empty. It's scary because somebody should be there playing and having this beautiful the same childhood. The same goes for school hallways. They're silent. And that's horrible. Your brain is expecting to hear laughter, but it hears nothing. And to make my point, liminal spaces feel wrong because they remind us that time has passed, and time is undefeated, and no matter what you do, you can't fight it or ignore it because it always wins. And liminal space is evidence of that. It's proof that a moment ended, and it's proof that people moved on. And those lost promises, I think, really exist in schools, especially in school liminal spaces with empty hallways, because as a child you were told you could be anything, and now we're stuck in a timeline where we didn't become what we thought we would be. And I think that's why we're so scared of liminal spaces, because we look at them and see those empty promises that were made to us. However, we're trapped in a society that couldn't give two shits if we reach our dreams or not, and liminal spaces are one of the most beautiful representations of that. And now I want to shift a little bit into the real reason liminal horror kind of exploded on the internet, and it still is present now with this whole Backrooms movie coming out. I think liminal horror became popular because it arrived at exactly the right moment. It arrived during COVID. And now that it's back, I think the Backrooms movie is going to be wildly successful because it also arrived at the right moment. A lot of people are exhausted. They're burnt out, lonely, disconnected. We grew up in life believing life followed this map. Go to school, work hard, follow the rules, everything will work out. Then adulthood arrived, and many people found themselves standing in an empty mall, wondering where the promised happiness went. And the Backrooms captures that perfectly. The movie, the short film, all those weird little TikToks I see about all the levels that I've never heard of. It's an infinite world built around things that used to have purpose, just like how many people feel, and it resonates. It's not even a very supernatural type of thing. It's just relatable. The scariest thing about the Backrooms isn't that it's fucking impossible. The scariest thing is that emotionally, we've all been there, whether we'd like to admit it or not. In conclusion, like I said, the Backrooms is not about the monsters. I did see a lot of people talking shit about this movie because they felt like it didn't have all the entities, the smilers or the skin stealers or those weird hound thingies. It's really about the grief and the regret and the burnout. And it's a terrifying realization that sometimes the things we're searching for no longer exist, and they never will again. And the movie understands something that most horror stories don't understand. The things that haunt us are rarely fucking hiding in the dark. They're inside our minds, and they exist in old conversations, photographs, homes, versions of ourselves. They exist in there. The Backrooms is what happens when those things become a real place. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do, to visualize this feeling that we had. We wander endlessly, mistake it for a home sometimes, like how Clark did, a place that promises answers but never provides them, because the truth is some doors don't fucking lead anywhere. They just lead to a pool room that I was really happy to see in the movie, because I don't really like the version of the Backrooms with all the levels, but I will tell you what, I do love a pool room. I don't know why, I fucking love the pool rooms. I think they're just so creepy and so cool. And maybe that's the final lesson of the Backrooms, not the pool rooms, the Backrooms. Not that we should forget the past, or that we should stop remembering it. I don't think that's what it was trying to say. I think it's trying to say we can't live there. We can't live in the past, because eventually every fucking hallway ends, every memory fades, every version of ourself disappears. And if we spend our entire lives wandering through yesterday, we'll never discover what's waiting tomorrow. The monsters aren't hiding at the end of the hallway, people. The monster was the belief that happiness was hiding somewhere behind us. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it was a little bit more mellow than I normally do, but I had a lot of feelings during the Backrooms movie. I have loved the Backrooms for a very long time, and it was just, I thought it was amazing to see it finally on the big screen. I went and saw it opening night in a sold-out movie theater. It was really great. I loved every second of it, and I just really wanted to analyze it, because in my heart and soul, I am a fucking nerd who loves to analyze everything I've done. So if you have any other movies you'd like me to analyze or talk about, I am here for that. I love talking about shit. I love cosmic horror, if you can't tell. I love existential dread portrayed in film. So if you want me to talk about that more, I will. I have a lot more free time to make YouTube videos now, so expect a lot more coming out of me. I can't wait to blow up this shit and be annoying as hell. But anyway, have a great day, everybody. Bye!